You tried a new leg day routine, felt fine walking out of the gym, and then woke up the next morning barely able to sit down on the toilet. 2 days later, it's even worse. This is DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, and almost everyone who lifts weights has experienced it at some point, usually after trying something new or pushing harder than usual. Let's start with what DOMS actually is. It's that achy, stiff, tender feeling that shows up in your muscles a day or two after unfamiliar or unusually intense exercise. Unlike the sharp, immediate pain of an actual injury, DOMS builds gradually, typically starting 12 to 24 hours after your workout and peaking somewhere between 24 and 72 hours later. The defining feature is the delay. You can finish a hard leg workout and feel completely normal that evening, only to wake up the next day struggling to walk downstairs. So what actually causes it? For a long time, people assumed DOMS was caused by lactic acid buildup in the muscles. That theory has been thoroughly debunked. Lactic acid clears from your muscles within about an hour of finishing exercise, long before soreness even begins. The actual cause is microscopic damage to muscle fibers, along with the inflammatory response your body mounts to repair that damage. This micro damage happens most from eccentric contractions, the lengthening phase of a muscle under load, like the lowering portion of a squat or the downward part of a bicep curl. Eccentric movements place more mechanical stress on individual muscle fibers than concentric contractions do, which is exactly why unfamiliar lifts and slow negative reps tend to produce the worst soreness. This explains why DOMS hits hardest after trying something new. Your muscles adapt fairly quickly to a repeated stimulus, a phenomenon called the repeated bout effect, where the same exercise done again within a few weeks produces noticeably less soreness the second time. That's why the soreness after your first leg day in months feels brutal, while your fifth leg day in a row of the same routine barely registers. Here's the timeline you can expect. In the first 12 hours after training, there's little to no soreness yet. That's the delay DOMS is named for. Between 12 and 24 hours, soreness starts to build. Muscles feel stiff and tender. Between 24 and 72 hours, you hit peak soreness, and movement or stretching feels most uncomfortable. By 3 to 5 days after, soreness gradually fades as repair completes. And by 5 to 7 days, it should be fully resolved for most people. If soreness is still severe after a full week, or if it feels sharp and localized rather than a general dull ache, that's a signal to stop assuming it's DOMS and get it checked out. Now, here's one of the most persistent myths in the gym, and it's worth clearing up directly. Does soreness mean you had a good workout? Not really. Soreness is not a reliable measure of how effective or productive a workout was. DOMS mostly reflects how unfamiliar or eccentric heavy the exercise was for your muscles at that point in time, not how much muscle growth actually happened. As your body adapts to a training routine, soreness naturally decreases even while the workout continues to be just as effective, sometimes more effective, as your technique and capacity improve. Chasing soreness as a training goal is actually counterproductive, since it often leads people to constantly switch up exercises purely to feel sore again, which sacrifices the consistency that actually drives long-term results. So what actually helps DOMS recover faster? Light movement, gentle walking, easy cycling, or light stretching increases blood flow to sore muscles without adding more damage. Adequate protein and calories give your body the raw materials it needs to repair the micro damage causing the soreness. Quality sleep matters more than almost anything else, since the majority of muscle repair happens during deep sleep. Massage and foam rolling show a meaningful reduction in the perceived intensity of soreness, even if they don't necessarily change the underlying rate of tissue repair. And heat therapy, a warm bath or heating pad shortly after exercise, has shown some benefit for reducing soreness and stiffness. What doesn't reliably help is worth knowing too. Ice baths and cold water immersion show mixed and often unimpressive results for DOMS specifically. Stretching before or after the workout that caused the soreness doesn't meaningfully prevent or reduce it, despite how popular that belief is. And relying on anti-inflammatory medication as a routine fix isn't ideal, since some research suggests chronic use may interfere with the muscle adaptation you're actually trying to achieve. It's also worth knowing how to tell DOMS apart from an actual injury, since treating a real strain like ordinary soreness can turn a minor issue into a much longer setback. DOMS builds gradually over 12 to 24 hours. An acute strain typically causes pain immediately or within minutes during the exercise itself. DOMS feels like a dull, generalized ache across the whole muscle. An injury tends to produce sharp, localized pain at a specific point, often with swelling or bruising, and DOMS reliably resolves within about a week, while pain that persists or worsens past that window is worth getting checked out. Should you train through DOMS? It depends on severity. but light to moderate training through it is generally safe. If a muscle group is sore, but you can move it through a full range of motion without sharp pain, training that muscle again at reduced intensity is unlikely to cause harm and may even support recovery through increased blood flow. What's worth avoiding is pushing through DOMS at full intensity, particularly with more eccentric heavy work, since this can compound the existing damage. A practical approach many lifters use is training a different muscle group while a previous one recovers. You can't eliminate DOMS entirely, especially any time you introduce a genuinely new stimulus, but a few habits reduce how often and how severely it hits. Progress gradually into new exercises and rep ranges over a couple of weeks instead of jumping straight into a brand new program at full intensity. Warm up properly, light cardio plus a few lighter warm-up sets, which prepares muscles for the working sets ahead. And stay consistent, since muscles used to a given stimulus produce far less soreness than muscles doing something for the first time in months. Nutrition timing is worth a quick mention too. Beyond simply eating enough protein and calories overall, consuming protein and carbohydrates in the hours after a hard training session supports the repair process that's already happening. Going a long stretch afterward without eating, especially combined with an overall low-protein diet, can genuinely slow recovery and potentially prolong soreness. Some research has looked at specific compounds, tart cherry juice, curcumin, and omega-3 fatty acids, for their potential anti-inflammatory effects on DOMS. The results are mixed and generally modest at best. These aren't magic fixes, and none of them replace the fundamentals of eating enough, sleeping enough, and progressing your training sensibly. Let's also talk about why beginners get hit so much harder than experienced lifters. Someone who has never trained before, or who is coming back after months off, has muscles that simply aren't adapted to any kind of mechanical loading, let alone the eccentric stress of a full workout. Every rep is a completely novel stimulus. That's why a first gym session, even a fairly light one, can leave a total beginner unable to lift their arms above their head for 2 days afterward. Experienced lifters aren't immune to DOMS. They just rarely trigger it with their normal training, since their muscles have already adapted to those specific movement patterns. It usually takes a genuinely new exercise, a big jump in volume, or a long layoff to bring it back for them. One more practical point, DOMS in different muscle groups can feel pretty different from each other. Soreness in large muscle groups like the quads or the back tends to feel like deep, generalized heaviness that makes basic movements like sitting down or climbing stairs uncomfortable. Soreness in smaller muscle groups, biceps, triceps, calves, tends to feel more localized and is often less disruptive to daily life, even if it's just as intense in the muscle itself. Neither type is more or less normal, it's just a reflection of which muscles took on the eccentric load during that particular workout. DOMS muscle soreness is a normal, temporary response to unfamiliar or unusually intense training, not a sign of damage to worry about and not a badge of honor to chase after every workout. It usually resolves within 5 to 7 days on its own, and the recovery tools that actually help, light movement, enough protein, and real sleep, are the same fundamentals that support recovery in general. Stay consistent with your training, progress gradually into new exercises, and let soreness fade on its own timeline instead of treating it as a measure of how hard you worked. Full breakdown with the complete recovery checklist and how to tell DOMS apart from a real injury is linked below.